audio today.
Testing. Okay. Looks like it's recording.
Sound like a brat.
And so with Chapter 2, we're going to be talking about operation strategy and management and how they, how kind of the product attributes and the process attributes need to link together, right? So it's kind of just a continuation of what we talked about last Thursday from Chapter 1. And that being said, then on Thursday, we're going to go into an exam review. I'll kind of cover the different types of problems that you could see on the exam. It's a lot like 343. If you had me for 343, if you understand how to do the problems that are in the exam review, you're going to be in pretty good shape on the exam. If you don't understand them, you're probably not going to be in very good shape on the exam. So I don't necessarily try to throw curveballs at you on the exam. Okay. So again, we'll get into the specifics on that, and then next Tuesday in class, you'll take the exam. Okay. All right. Any questions about where we're at, where we're headed? Okay. All right. Then let's go ahead and move into Chapter 2. And I do a lot to make life easier for me and to kind of support some of the online students and yourselves if you want. A lot of the notes that I talk about are actually noted on the PowerPoint slides. So if you're ever trying to go back and review something, you should be able to see, kind of the context of what I try to place it in when I go through it in class. So Chapter 2, Operation Strategy and Management. Chapter 1 was about understanding the process view of the organization. Chapter 2 is about understanding the strategic role that operations plays. I've worked for a lot of different folks over the years, and some of them tend to want to think that like engineering is king, right? Or operations is king, or marketing is king, right? My experience has been that those have to be all kind of working together, right? They have to have the same vision about what's important to their customer and how are we driving towards that. One of the best ways to do that is to make sure that you're incentivizing folks to make good choices, right? If you are managing an organization and you are your operations people, you're bonusing them off of how low they keep their costs, right? Every time marketing wants to make any variation or add anything in, they're going to be saying, look, quit. We don't need anything more. We need to keep our costs low. That's what we're incentivized for, right? And on the other hand, if marketing is incentivized on their total sales dollars, right, they're about, well, let's add as much variety in there as we can because we need to get as much out in the business world as we can, okay? And then what happens, though, is what should they be focused on? Should it be keeping costs low or keeping sales high? What should the focus be on? I feel like nobody's listening this morning. That's why I'm asking questions. So you need to kind of engage here. So what did I just repeat back to me? What I just said. Let's just see if we're engaged at all here.
You want to know if they want to keep their costs high, or keep their sales high, or keep their costs low.
Right. And so if you're going to incentivize people on that, what's the drawback to that?
That they're always going to be focused on just doing that instead of actually getting.
They're focused on functional areas as opposed to what's best for the entire business, right? So if you want to say, well, let's focus on what's best for the entire business, what should we be focused on? Not total sales, not keeping costs low, but what should we be focused on?
Making money.
Profit, right? So if you incentivize both sides on profit, right, now the operations folks, instead of going, don't make me do any more than what I already do, their question is, well, what's the bottom line profit? And if that's valuable, they say, okay, let's step up and we're going to do that, right? And so you can really do your business a disservice by incentivizing on the wrong things, right? If you do salespeople on total sales and operations people on lower costs, they're never going to be on the same page, right? And if you can focus them on profit, right, then you're going to get to that same page. All right. So just as an overview, we're going to talk about the concepts of strategic positioning and operational effectiveness, okay? We're going to talk about business strategy in terms of markets, customers, and products and operation strategy and how we link those together. And we emphasize the importance of that strategic fit among business strategy, operation strategy, and your process architecture and your operating policies. And my guess is if I'm you and I've not heard those terms before, they sound like one thing. They're slightly different as we go down that list. Okay? All right. We're also going to talk about how to focus on narrow market segments and how we can structure our business processes to facilitate that fit. We want to model to match products and processes according to variety and volume. Okay. And we're going to talk about the operational frontier, which, again, is about how do we find that competitive space and where we're going to compete in it with product cost, response time, variety, and quality. Okay. 2.7, we are not going to cover that, so you can cross that off your list in terms of things to review in the textbook because we talked about those topics in Management 350 and LSC 343. I think 2.7 is probably history, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just take a quick peek. Yeah, the evolution of strategy and operations management. It's just kind of the history of it. And again, we cover that in 343 and 350, so we're not going to take the time here. We're going to talk about service operations a little bit. Okay? So when we talk about competitive product space, okay, so if you think about where a firm competes, what product portfolio do they have as measured along the 4 dimensions or product attributes of product cost, response time, variety, and quality. Okay, and I say see figure 2.1 in your textbook. I'm going to go ahead and flash that up just so we can all kind of reference back to that. So basically, you can talk about cost, efficiency, and variety. You've got 2 axes, right? Cost, efficiency, and variety. And you're saying, where do we compete? If we have low cost, what matches with that is typically low variety. If we have high variety, then we typically have higher cost, right? And there's other places that we can fit in that product space, but we have to be conscious about where we want to be, okay? So our strategic positioning defines the positions that a firm wants to occupy within that product space. Okay, so the example that I use is the airline industry, right? Warren Buffett says, if a far-sighted capitalist had been president at Kitty Hawk, he would have done his successors a huge favor by shooting Orville down, right? It's a testament to how much money has been lost in the airline industry over the centuries, okay? So let's use Southwest as an example of an airline that's not traditional and compare them to some of the traditional airlines, okay? So Southwest has had atypical performance when compared to traditional airline companies, okay? They generate profits for 20 plus years through 2009, so we're a little dated with our information, but through 2009, right, they had 20 plus years of profits. The high was $645 million in 2000, the low was $99 million in 2009, okay? And they've continued to struggle some since then. Okay. United, on the other hand, which would be more of a traditional airline, entered bankruptcy between 2003 and 2006 in order to restructure and return to profitability. And Delta lost about $9 million in 2008. Right? Can you imagine if you were this? You know, they're not sole ownership, but I mean, $9 million. That's a ton of money to lose in a year, right? Both carriers have attempted to set up low-cost subsidiaries with limited success. Delta set up Delta Express in 1996 to compete with low-cost carriers. It ceased operations in 2003. Delta established Song, another low-cost subsidiary, and then was reabsorbed into Delta. United set up its low-cost TED unit. Did any of you ever hear of TED or remember TED? Okay, it was short-lived and discontinued at the end of 2008. Okay.
I think I remember it.
What's that?
I think I remember it.
I kind of remember hearing some about it. I wasn't traveling a lot in that time. I was going to school, so. But what do you know? How many of you have traveled on Southwest? Okay, so pretty much the back row. So those of you that have traveled on Southwest, what is it that they do? Have you traveled on other airlines as well?
Yes.
What is it that they do differently than the other airlines?
Your bag check is free.
The bag check is free. Okay.
It's always generally like cheaper. Like I don't know, it's not like it's not nice, but like compared to like Delta or United and some of the other ones, it's always like it's kind of like they like have like a little bit like definitely a different economy. Like their first class is like what some of the other ones like medium class seats and stuff are versus theirs.
Isn't it you can sit wherever you want? Like you walk in, like you just let us sit wherever.
Okay.
You don't like get specific seats.
Have an assigned seat.
Yeah.
And I think that might have. When did you last fly Southwest?
When I was like a senior in high school.
Okay,
like
so I think
4 years ago.
Yeah, so I think that might vary a little bit because I've been on Southwest and been assigned specific seats, but they load you differently.
They let you pick, like, when I just made airlines go on this trip and we go on Friday, you can, like, on the internet, they have, like, all the seats, and they're like, these ones are available. Then they try to charge you more if you want, like, the certain window seats or all
Right, if you want the one with more knee room, or they've got them pegged to know, they know whether or not which ones are the most popular, and so they're going to get a little extra money for those, okay? But typically, they keep their costs low, and one of the ways that they do that is how they board you on the plane is different than how you're boarded on United or Delta, right? They kind of line you up, and to me, so again, this is my nerdiness, but to me it makes perfect sense, right? They line you up, and so the people in the back of the plane get on first, and they go to the back of the plane, right? And everybody else that follows is getting on behind them. So you don't have all this first class gets on and everybody else has to wait while first class gets situated, and then everybody else then can go down. And so one of their key components is how quickly they can turn their planes at the gate, right? That's what makes them money, is their planes don't make money when they're on the ground, they make money when they're moving. And so they really focused on that. How do we do that? And one of the things they did is they cross-trained their individuals so that if you were at the gate, you could do a variety of different things, right? And United and Delta typically focus more kind of on, my role is to be here at the desk and to engage with the customer. My role is to be, between the plane and the walkway, right? And they don't do that. They say, do whatever you have to do to get the customer, to get the folks loaded and be quick on the plane. Okay, so this success that Southwest had challenged that traditional airline and raises a set of questions to address how we link a firm's strategy to its business processes. So how does a company's strategic positioning in the market affect its choice of business processes? Things we're going to answer in this chapter. How can a company verify that its processes have the appropriate competencies to support its competitive advantage? Okay, and how can a company use the trade-offs inherent in process competencies to its advantage when designing its business processes? So the first step to answer the question is to understand where a firm is competing in its competitive product space. So what are you competing on? Are you competing on product cost? Are you competing on response time? Are you competing on variety? Or are you competing on quality? And you have to make a strategic decision and say, this is what we're going to do best, in order to be clear across your organization about what you're trying to accomplish. Okay? So typically you can put on the x-axis of a diagram, right? And you can put time, variety, and quality on the y-axis and cost on the x-axis. Okay? And so, or you can think about time on one axis and you put the other three on the independent axis. And so you think about this three-dimensional product space and about where this is going to be. Okay? Are you guys working on something else back there?
No,
What was the time variety? What you were saying?
Okay. So I'm just curious because everybody's heads are.
On your
I have the notes up.
Okay. All right. I'm just because I'm seeing no eye contact with anybody. I'm like, okay, are we engaged or are you on your own thing? Okay. So Hunter, what was the question you asked?
It's time, variety, and cost are the three that are always together.
So you can put cost on the bottom, right? Typically you can put cost on the x-axis, and you can put response time, variety, and quality on the y-axis.
Yeah, that's what I was.
And so then you can think about that in terms of this three-dimensional product space, right? And with this three-dimensional product space, you can say, okay, are we going to be the quickest? Or where are we going to be at with response time, variety, or quality, right? And you're going to find this space that you say, that's our niche. That's where we're going to compete, okay? And being clear about that is going to send the right message all the way through the organization, right? And if you get it wrong, right, then you have to change that message all the way through the organization, okay? So figure 2.1 that we looked at only showed variety and cost while holding response time and quality constant. Okay, so in that example, firm A provides a low-cost, standardized product, while firm B provides a customized, expensive product. Okay, so in Southwest example, what do you think Southwest primarily competes on? Low cost, right? And to support it, they've designed and operated their processes that aim for high utilization of assets. So again, the planes are the most expensive thing they have. So they're going to say, we're going to make the most use of those planes, and we're going to keep them in the air and moving as often as we can. Okay? And for high utilization of assets and a high level of labor productivity to lower costs. And to get that high level of labor productivity, you have to get your employees to buy into what's my if I'm one of the people working at the counter, what's my incentive to get out from behind the counter and go help them do the, sometimes what can get planes behind is if their luggage is full, right, in the overheads, and they've got to put it underneath the plane, what's my incentive to get out from behind the counter and help get that done, right? You have to reward people for that behavior. And so again, they rewarded their people via some profit sharing, right? And they said, if you engage with this and help us get there, right, there's a reward for you, okay? And so I would suggest that Southwest was competing on low cost and reliable delivery, because that was one of the things that they were known for, is they would get you to your destination on time with a high regularity, especially when compared to like United and Delta, okay? And so while United and Delta were competing on variety in terms of flight coverage and cost, if we look at Southwest operations, they were set up to match their strategic position, while United and Delta are probably not as cleanly matched. Okay? So the key is to deliver that superior performance, you must strive to deliver the product attributes that are distinct from those of its competition and create business processes that are more effective in producing and delivering them over your competition. So we define operational effectiveness as possessing processes, process competencies. We define operational effectiveness as possessing process competencies that support the given strategic position. Okay? So again, we're effective if we have identified the market space that we want to compete in and we match our operational processes to those. Okay? All right. Operational effectiveness is not the same thing as operational efficiency, right? Effectiveness is about matching to your strategic position. Are you doing what matters in the marketplace? Efficiency is about doing it at the lowest cost, right? Be both effective and efficient. You want to match to what you need to be in the marketplace, and you want to do that at the lowest possible cost. Okay? So we have a bit of a strategy hierarchy, right? And there are some different ways to look at it, and we're going to kind of take a two-pronged approach in how we look at it. Okay? One approach says that your corporate strategy should be the defining thing, and it should work from the top down. Okay? So it defines the scope of each division or business unit in terms of the attributes of the products that it will offer and the market segments that it will sell. So let me give you an example, probably the one that I know the best. So in the Pella window world, right, the corporate strategy is to provide, they have this basic, to provide, there's a name for it, but it's fenestration, which is basically any opening that you have in your home, a window, a door, a garage door. They want to be able to provide anything that anybody needs to purchase to fill those openings, okay? And to do that, their corporate strategy has been to divide their organization up into subdivisions based on what they're competing on, okay? So there's a custom division, okay? So if you think about custom division, they're competing on quality, right, and time, okay? And so their profit margin is pretty good, okay? And then they have what's called the Architect Series, okay? The Architect Series are for those customers who want high quality wood windows and doors with beautiful mutton patterns and kind of this degree of quality that is not custom, but it's the next best thing to custom, right? And then you go from the Architect Series to the ProLine Series, which is also a wood window, but it's your very basic. It has a base level of quality that meets the standards that the customer wants, but it's at a lower cost, and it has fewer options with it, right? So the Architect Series, you get these beautiful windows that we would have almost artists that could create mutton patterns that you have foam mutton patterns in between. If you think about the grids that are there, the Architect Series has foam between the windows, it has metal grids on the outside, and it has wood grids on the inside, and all three of those have to match up almost exactly, right? And so you have these kind of artists that can do that with wood, right, and with metal, okay? And so we would, in the custom plant, that was really an issue. In the Architect Series plant, you have standards, but they're hard to meet. In the Murray plant, in the vinyl division, right, there are no grids like that. Everything is between the glass, and you don't have, the option is not to have this kind of more high-end look of having a physical on the inside and outside. And actually, many customers prefer that, right? Because when I go to clean my window, and I've got the higher end, I have to clean individually every single pane, right? When I have a vinyl window, I can just whoosh, 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 the whole thing, right? And I'm good to go. So again, there's these kind of variations, but they're each of these. So you have custom, you have Architect Series, you have Pro Line Series, and then you have Vinyl Series. And they're all competing in different market spaces. And because they're all competing in different market spaces, the approach then is that you're going to do things differently in each plant. You would not want the custom folks working next to the vinyl folks, okay? Because the custom folks produce about 100 windows a day, right? And the vinyl folks produce about 360 windows a day on a production line, right? And so you can imagine the conflict that would be created if the two of you work next to each other, and you would be saying, yeah, we have the quality product, right? We're kind of the cream of the crop. And you'd be going, yeah, but you guys are slower than molasses. If you guys would just hurry up, think how much more money, you know. So there's these inherent kind of headbutting that can go on if you've got these different strategies trying to compete in the same space, okay? So business strategy defines the scope of each division or business unit. So I've just given you the four that we were talking about with Pella, right? Custom, right? Architect Series, Pro Line, and Vinyl. Okay, and they have others, but those are four basic ones. And so their functional strategies then define the purpose for marketing, operations, and finance within those business strategies. Okay, and those are the three main functions in most organizations. So functionally, marketing identifies and targets the customers that the business unit wants to serve, the products that it must supply in order to meet customer needs, and the competition that it will face in the marketplace. Operations designs, plans, and manages the processes through which the business unit supplies customers with desired products. In particular, operations strategy configures and develops business processes that best enable a firm to produce and deliver the products specified by the business strategy. Finance acquires and allocates the resources needed to operate a unit's business processes. Okay? Operations is responsible for developing or acquiring the necessary process competencies. Okay? And we're going to focus in this chapter on the process competencies. We focused in the last chapter on product attributes. Now we're going to talk about process competencies and how they need to marry up, right, if we're going to be effective in the marketplace. And our process competencies are process cost, which of course goes with if you're competing on product attribute cost, right, flow time, flexibility, and quality, okay, are those process competencies. All right. Business strategy versus operation strategy. Business strategy is concerned with selecting external markets and products to supply them. Operations strategy is concerned with designing the internal processes and interfaces between the input and output markets. Right? I'm focused on the plant. What is it I need to be doing in the plant to provide, or in my service operation, to meet that that desired need? Okay. So a general example of business strategy that focuses on product cost as a top competitive priority calls for an operation strategy that focuses on efficient and lean business processes, so like Southwest. Okay. Specifically, how many of you have heard of Zara? They're a fashion designer. Yeah? They're used a lot in some different examples that you find, because they have this kind of, I would say 3, maybe 4 years ago, they just kind of swept the fashion industry with their ability to, with their speed to market, right? And you can imagine in the fashion industry, speed to market is a huge competitive advantage, okay? And so they're a Spanish apparel retailer, They provide a wide variety of products quickly and replenish them in small lots, right? So that allows buyers to not have to buy big lots that, what if they don't work, right? So they can do these smaller lots and they get quicker turnaround. Their business strategy then focuses on short response time, and therefore their processes must include greater investments in inventory and or greater flexibility in resources. It's almost, this Zara to me is an example of, they became so well known for what they did and their approach to it, right, which was their competitive advantage, I think. What they did is they set up core businesses throughout the world, right, that could create the fabric, that could cut, that could sew, right, and they could mix and match and say, okay, this factory has capacity to make the fabric, this capacity has to cut, this factory to, and they had all these kind of set up on retainer almost situations, and then therefore they could quickly turn things because they had it said we're going to use that capacity. We don't exactly know how today, but we're going to use that capacity, right? And so, but I think that the interesting part about that is because they were so successful with it, they were interviewed and put on different shows and different magazines, and competitive advantage, they pretty well shared with the rest of the world what their competitive advantage was, right? And I'm not so sure if you're thinking about your long-term business strategy, there's that trade-off, right? So you probably get more business because people see that you're doing it the best, but you're also giving away, you're telling everybody what your competitive advantage is, and then they can go out and execute it, right? So Zara, again, is one of those that they found the way, what they focused on was what's most important to their customer. And then the fashion world, it's quick turnaround, right, and smaller lots. And if you can deliver that, you're going to get more business because that's what's important to your customer. So then they figured out, well, from an operational perspective, what is it that we can do or different than what we're currently doing it, okay? What do you think McDonald's competes on? Without looking at the slide, the notes on the slide, what do you think McDonald's competes on?
Low cost.
Low cost, okay. Do they have to have anything else besides low cost?
They get it out pretty quick.
Okay, so it's low cost, it's some speed, okay. And is there consistent quality?
They have something in their burgers because they're terrible. And for some reason, you just crave them, and it's like.
Oh yeah. So you're saying that there's some kind of like addictive element in their hamburger.
Yeah, because they're terrible, and then it's like you just randomly get a craving one time. I need a McDonald's hamburger. It's like it's terrible.
What did you say, Scotty?
I said they're so good though.
Well, and I think the deal is there's a kind of a level of quality that they maintain, and I don't know that's quite as true today as it was 20 years ago, but when you walk into a McDonald's, if it's in Murray, Kentucky, or Corning, Iowa, or Denver, Colorado, and you order a quarter-pound cheeseburger, it's going to taste pretty much the same, right? And there's some.
It's like Walmart. It's the same thing wherever you walk into. You got Walmart here, Walmart there, and it's like the exact same layout. It's
right. And so that's one of the things that they found ways to deliver low cost and a given level of quality pretty effectively. Okay, so so from a product attribute, they're competing on low cost, consistent quality, and quick delivery. So from a process attribute, they're doing a low cost process that's repeatable, right? They have to be able to do it in multiple locations, and it's flexible to ramp up production, right? So they can add more employees in to get food out faster. I don't know how we know this, but we do. How many employees do you think McDonald's employs here in Murray, Kentucky?
It's like 40 something.
Okay.
55.
My husband he's talked, it's like 200.
What?
Because you think about how many people have to be on to go, are you for sure it's 40?
My friend used to work there, said it was 40 at the time.
Okay. Well, and so I don't know if that's like but he's saying throughout the week, all the shifts, they have about 200 different employees.
That makes sense.
Supply chains and stuff too?
No, that's just saying if you think about how many people have to, like at 3 until 6 during the supper rush, how many people are actually back there?
And then all the school schedules and stuff.
Why do they build the biggest McDonald's east of Mississippi in Murray, Kentucky? It doesn't make any sense to me, but
Well, but then if you ever had to get in line and wait on 641 to get in line, you'd say, okay, they did need to make it a little bigger. So
In Orlando, they have the world's largest McDonald's. I know because my sister's birthday, that's where she wanted to go as a kid. And it's 3 stories,
Yeah,
and it's
big.
like Chuck E. Cheese meets McDonald's.
is that right?
they have
Yeah.
that one in Oklahoma that's
Yeah.
over the interstate. I don't know if anybody's ever seen
I think
that.
those are cool. Yeah, I like to stop at those kind of things just because they're fun to get out and look at how different they do things. Okay, so we're slightly off target here, but so the reality of it is that they match their process attributes to their product attributes, right? They figured out how to do that. Okay? All right. So product attribute to process competency. So if you have a low cost, that's your product attribute that you're competing on, you need to focus on efficient and lean business processes. If you have a high quality is what you're competing on, you need to make sure that you can deliver high quality processes with precision equipment. If you're competing on product variety, you need to make sure that you have flexible business processes to produce and deliver customized products. Okay? Short response times. Business processes must include greater investment in inventories for manufactured goods or greater resource availability through excess capacity for manufacturing and service operations. So that last one is exactly what we're talking about with McDonald's. They have the ability to flex up and get more people in the process when they need it, right? Versus from a manufacturing standpoint, you have the ability to either say, like most of the production lines at Pella have 3 staffing levels, right? One for when business is slow, one for when business is kind of medium, which is kind of the ideal one, and then one for when business is flat out, we can't hardly keep up, right? And that's usually when operators are kind of really next to each other and kind of rubbing elbows a little bit, okay? But if the key is we're going to make our delivery times, we're going to do that as opposed to not be able to make our delivery times. Alternatively, if our sales are stable enough and we know these are the products that are going to sell, we can produce them in the slow time and store them and sell them later, right? But in today's environment, our marketplace changes so often and we offer such a variety, we can't do nearly as much of that as what we once could. Okay? So a framework for designing an operation strategy and structure. So you do the business unit strategy first. You figure out what the desired competencies are. You talk about what the operation structure needs to be, what processes need to flow into that, and what resources you need for that. And they show it with kind of these dotted line arrows, or this second set of arrows that goes back up through, right? Because if, for whatever reason, if your operations is not able to deliver, you need to make sure that you're communicating and you're kind of coming to some consensus on how you're going to handle it, okay? So let me just do a quick. So again, the managing by business process flows just makes a suggestion that this is kind of the traditional look, but you could also say, if you understand what's going on here, right, maybe there's things you can do in the marketplace that you wouldn't do otherwise. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in this section, okay? So if we want to link the strategic role and process view, right, you say, okay, what's the feasible business strategy? What's our existing capabilities and what's our current operational structure? Okay? And then you say, where do we want to be? What product attributes do we want to compete on? Do we want to compete on price, time, quality, or variety? Right? And given what we want to compete on, what is it that we need our operational structure to be and how can we transition to that? And you need to make conscious choices about that because the marketplace changes, and if you're not actively going back and looking to see what we've been doing versus where we need to be, you can get these disconnects there. So, key conditions for process effectiveness is the existence of strategic fit among 3 main components: strategic position, the process architecture, and the managerial policies. Okay, so don't you know, we're going to talk about some of those a little bit more. Okay, sometimes you can say you can say there is no permanent state of strategic fit. Remember when I just said you have to go back and look? Okay, so Dell is a great example of that. Their initial focus, they increased product variety and customization while keeping costs low and delivery response time and quality acceptable. What they did is they had basic components that you could go on the internet and you could go, this is the Dell computer that I want. I want it to have this monitor. I want it to have this, RAM. I want it to have this, and you could put the pieces together. What you didn't know, what the customer doesn't know, is they've got all of those components pre-staged up that they can match together, right? And so what they would do is go, okay, well, you ordered this. They don't have to build it from scratch. They just have to put these components together and ship it out, right? So it's a lot simpler. They're delaying that final product till the customer orders it, but then they're just pulling those components together, okay? And that worked extraordinarily well. They had this business model where they could actually get the money from their customer before they had to pay their supplier, right? Think about that if that was your business model, right? You wouldn't have to have your cash is not what's keeping the business afloat. It's the fact that your customers are paying for the supplies that you need, okay? But then over time, the hardware becomes more of a commodity and customer priorities shifted from customization to low cost, right? You see that in many markets, right? Starts out to be extra special, customized is important, all the bells and whistles, to over time, it becomes more standard. So then Dell shifted their operational focus to sell through retail stores like Walmart instead of only direct and outsource some assembly to third parties, okay? So you have to be watching what's happening in the marketplace. And it's what's so, I don't know, you could use the term frustrating or exciting depending on what type of person you are. I mean, that's with business, right? You get it set up and you're making good money, and then all of a sudden the market changes and you either change with it or you're not going to be making money anymore, right? And so you can't be complacent. You've got to be watching what's happening in the marketplace. So we can talk about market and process-driven strategies, okay? And this is kind of what I was talking about when you think about the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach, okay? Market-driven strategies I consider to be the top-down approach. You start with the key competitive priorities. What product attributes are you going to compete on? And then you develop the processes to support them, okay? The process-driven strategy, on the other hand, is you say, what is it that we do well, and how can we leverage that into different market positions? So an example of that, the one that makes the most sense to me, because my husband has a mowing business, right, is if you think about a golf course, right? So fundamentally, some of the processes that they have on a golf course is they have to understand how to maintain and take care of grass, right? And they have equipment to mow the grass. They have the knowledge in terms of what fertilizers to apply, when to seed, when to do all of that, right? Okay, so that's their processes. So if you're going to take a process-driven strategy, you would say, well, what could a golf course do with those processes that they already do and to become more profitable? Well, one of the things they could do is they could actually then have a mowing business, right? And they could offer to weed, seed, do all of those things because they're already doing it. They already have the chemicals and they have the knowledge in terms of knowing how to do it, okay? And so that's when you start to say, what is it that we do really well and how can we leverage that into other markets as opposed to what market are we in and how can we best match that? Both of those approaches work, okay? Let's see. In general, strategic fit requires both market and process-driven strategies. The resulting view of strategic fit, it inextricably links a company's internal competencies, what it does well, and its external industry environment, what the market demands and what competitors offer. Okay? Producers of commodity products tend to be market-driven, and technology innovative companies tend to drive markets. For an example, Apple had remarkable success using its design competency and an intimate understanding of their customer. eBay and Google are examples of service providers whose technological innovations drove the online auction and search markets. Okay? And all these examples note that even though their origin was a technical innovation, ultimate success depended on meeting a customer need effectively with their underlying operation. Okay? And they'll tell you, oftentimes the best business ideas come from somebody that's frustrated with something that's not working in the marketplace, right? You'll go, I hate that this doesn't work this way. Well, if you can solve that problem, right, that's a great business opportunity. Okay? All right. So, again, I talked a little bit earlier about, the 4 divisions, custom, architect series, ProLine series, and final, right? that's the example of focused operations, is how Pella does it, because those plants are in different locations. They don't mix and match those plants. So in a focused operation, no single process, what we're saying, can perform well on every dimension. There cannot be a process that fits all strategies. And if you try to do that, you're in trouble. Okay? Choosing a strategy, therefore, involves focus. And so Michael Porter says the essence of strategy is what to do and what not to do. Right? What is it that we're going to focus on, and what is it that we're going to leave alone? Okay? Focused strategy is committing to a limited, congruent set of objectives in terms of demand, products and markets, and supply, inputs, necessary process technologies, and volumes. So here's an example of where Pella said, nope, that's not what we're going to do. Right? They were approached by a business and said, well, you do windows and doors. Why don't you do valances and drapes too? Right? But if you think about valances and drapes and windows and doors, fundamentally those operations are very different, right? That's not what we were good at. And so you can say, yeah, let's expand and do that, but then you have to come up with a whole different set of processes to support that, okay? So a focus strategy, again, says, what is it that we're going to commit to in terms of our objectives, in terms of demand and supply? Or this approach concentrates on serving limited market segments with business processes that are specifically designed and operated to meet their needs. So when we talk about a focus strategy equals a focus process, one which products fall within a small region of the competitive product space. Conversely, if the product portfolio is more dispersed, then the process will also be less focused. Okay, so I've got some examples of that. The healthcare industry is a huge one for me. So in terms of a great example of this. So if you had to have eye surgery, would you prefer to go to Murray, Kentucky Community Hospital or Callaway County Community Hospital and have eye surgery? Or would you rather go to a clinic that does eye surgeries day in and day out again and again and again? Right? And so that focus strategy, focus process, that's a better fit, right? You can feel more confident about their experience, about the quality that you're probably going to receive, and typically about the cost, because they have, again, they're set up to do that. So one of the examples is Aravind Eye Clinic in Maduri, India, does 300,000 cataract operations. Their service operation focus is high quality, low price, at the expense of variety. They don't do other things. That's their focus, is this eye surgery. Aldi is an international retailer specializing in a limited assortment of private label, high-quality products at the lowest possible prices. So they have a lean operating structure with emphasis on frugality and simplicity that yields a very low-cost structure. Okay. Then another example from the healthcare industry is, sorry, I clicked forward and didn't mean to, is Oakwood Hospital in Dearborn, Michigan. Right? Their emergency room, they have a job shop approach, right? And so their emergency room, a job shop approach can be a focused type of operation as long as the mission is to provide a variety of products, as long as they all have similar quality, cost, and timeliness attributes, okay? And again, I think probably one of the largest opportunities in the next 20 years is going to be in the medical industry. And if you think about how many people are aging into over 60, right, our medical industry is going to continue to expand, and we're going to need to figure out how to do things better than what we do them today. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. To try to call a doctor today, right, and get in to see a doctor, sometimes it's 6 to 8 weeks before you get in to see a doctor. So you hope you don't have a serious issue. Otherwise, you have to go to the emergency room, right? So and I don't know, maybe it's always been that way for you, but when I grew up, we could go see the family doctor, and call today and get in this afternoon, kind of a thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What if it's not? I mean, I don't know. I've never experienced any trouble getting in the doctor, like if I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, is it that bad, or does it just depend on where you're at, I guess?
So some of it's where you're at, and then I think some of it depends on if you. So I'll give you. So
a lot of it's probably who you know.
Working with health insurance, like I know I had covered 5 different states. In Texas and Illinois, Texas they have like HMO plans, but like most of the doctors are PPO, so they have that as a big issue where they have to travel hours to just go see someone who accepts their insurance.
I guess living in a bigger city though helps. You're coming
Yeah, I think that helps, and then it depends the type of insurance that you have helps. I mean, and so there's all these kind of factors that meet to say how big of an issue
Insurance
it
is also a problem, like in this area too, especially dental.
Yeah. Well, or if you want to see, like for example, Hunter, I don't know if you had a specific doctor that you wanted to see, like here in Murray, Kentucky. If you have a specific family doctor and you want to see him, like our family doctor is 8 weeks out
It's
for
like
a
when,
regular appointment.
Like high school when I broke my hand, I mean, like Kleiner and Coots hand surgeon, like right in Louisville, like the #1.
Right.
Boom. Like I was in there that day.
So again, that emergency is slightly different than the ongoing kind of chronic health type things.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it is interesting, and it is unfortunately it is some who you know. You know, I'm always thankful.
Yeah, because I kind of thought about that like after I said that, but my mom's friend swims with the wife of the.
Yeah, those things always help, right?
It
Those things always help. I went in for surgery here a couple years ago. First time I'd ever been in for surgery, and the doctor got annoyed with me because they were supposed to do 2 things when they did the surgery. And he's like, no, we're only doing this one today. And I'm like, no, then I'm not having the surgery. He's like, well, you can just come back and do the other one. I'm like, look, I'm not coming back to be put under so that you can open me up again to do 2 things. You're either going to do 2 things today or we're not going to do it. He got aggravated with me. And he went out and went to the waiting room to talk to my husband. And our next door neighbor has 3 siblings that are doctors in the same area that he is. And his demeanor went, oh, no problem. You know, I was like, you know, it was going to be a problem, you know, until it was that who do you know kind of a thing. It gets interesting. All right, so again, we've gotten a little bit off topic. So we're trying to get to that point, though, where we've got recognizing that if you're matching your strategy and your operations, right, you need to have product attributes, right, cost, quality, time, and variety. Need to match with process competencies, low cost, right, lean and efficient processes, quality, consistent levels of quality or high level of quality depending on what you're competing on, variety, being able to expand or produce different types of things. So again, you're trying to make sure you match those. Okay, so broad market segments but still using a focused strategy. Consider using a plant within a plant in which the entire facility is divided into several mini plants. So if you have to compete in multiple product spaces, right, but we've got the custom plant and we've got the vinyl plant, we don't want them right in the same space, but we can maybe have them in the same building but separated with some physical space. Okay, so think about examples of where the hospital separates the emergency room and trauma surgeries, hip replacement, knee replacement, right? Those are all kind of set up differently. All right. In 2002, United Airlines tried to use this plant within a plant strategy with their TED low-cost kind of business. And the problem is they weren't actually able to physically separate it because they were still using the same people, right, to do both the gate work and all of that. They were still using this. They meant to use a specific set of planes, but the scheduling would get complicated, and then you'd have the wrong planes on the wrong routes and trying to get that figured out. And so it never worked because they weren't actually able to physically separate. Okay, so and the reasons, again, they had the crossover of crews, they had the crossover equipment, and then passengers were confused. Right? I'm on a United flight. On this one I get these treats. On this one I don't. You know, what's going on here? Okay, and so United wasn't able to satisfy business travelers who ended up on TED expecting it to be like United, nor lower cost to the level of focused low-cost carriers. So eventually they dismantled TED in June of 2008. Their lack of success was due largely to their inability to truly separate the low-cost process from processes focused on the traditional customer. Okay? All right. And I would say that today you could say that Southwest is facing similar issues, right? They were trying to expand out and ended up having some challenges financially because of that. Okay. All right, this diagram is what's known as the product process matrix. And in the world of PhD students, right, Hayes and Wheelwright are the ones that created this in 1978. And, you know, we look at it and we go, oh, right, it's this amazing thing, right? I doubt if you see it as that amazing thing. But the reality of it is what they're showing us is this, when you look at on the axis, you have product variety and process flexibility. And they're saying we have different types of processes that fit best with those different mixes of flexibility and variety. So for example, if I have low if I have low process flexibility and low product variety, I can use a continuous flow. Okay? For line flows, right, like an auto assembly or car lubrication shop, right, things happen one right after another, right? I have a little bit more flexibility than in continuous flow. Think continuous flow is like an oil refinery, right? Something that once you start, you just never stop, right? Unless shutting it down is a huge ordeal, right? Okay, so that's continuous flow. Line flows are like your production lines that are producing the same thing again and again and again, right? Every 90 seconds, I'm getting a product off the end of that production line, okay? Batch processes are those in which you say, okay, well, we have more variety, so I'm going to do 100 at a time or 200 at a time, whatever batch size you're using, right? And I'm going to reset up my equipment to meet that flexibility, okay? So that's when you use a batch process. A job shop is like when you do it particular, every job that you do is going to be unique and different, right? So you have to set up specifically for that. So you can see that they kind of, from the bottom lower left to the upper right, you have, I'm doing one thing all the time, right, to I'm doing, every time I do a job, it's something different, and I'm setting up different, okay? And so basically what they say is that there are process architectures that fit those types of jobs, okay? So if you talk about a project or a job shop or batch, we use what's called the job shop architecture, okay? If I use line flow or continuous flow, we look at flow shop architecture, where we try to get things set up to just flow from one workstation to another, right? One unit at a time. So think of flow shop as one unit at a time. Job shop is I'm doing it in batches, okay? So let's talk about what's different about those two things. And let me switch back. All right, so characteristics of processes when we talk about job shop versus batch versus flow. So job shop, batch, and flow, right? Flow is how many units at a time?
A lot, isn't it?
What's that? You're doing a lot.
Flow's a lot of units that are not very varied much, and job shops, high variety, low number of units.
Okay, so you're right. The question that I was asking, though, is how many units at a time am I working on in a flow shop? One, right? And how many units, that's what you're trying to do, is get to a 1 unit flow, okay? But you're right, product volume is high here. I'm going to have a lot of volume going across this. And so in each of these cases, we're going to kind of go from high to low. So if this is high, that means as I move up, it's going to be low, right? So volume is going to be low in terms of a job shop. Okay, what about specialized equipment? Which is going to have more specialized equipment, which is going to have less specialized equipment.
Flow shop, you have more.
Flow shop has more specialized equipment because I'm setting everything up to do that 1 unit, and it can be exactly for that, right? When I look at a job shop, I need equipment, but it has to be flexible. I can't make it specialized because it's got to be able to do a variety of different things, okay? What about product variety? Which one? Let's do Taylor, which is low to high here. Product variety, which has more variety and which has less variety.
The job shop.
Job shop has what? More variety to less variety. Okay. Rachel, what about machine setup frequency?
Job shop's higher.
Right, because I have to do it every time I change jobs. I have to do, right? I have to do this setup. I have to change setups. Okay. What about labor skills? Courtney, what do you think? Who has to have higher labor skills? Flow shops or job shops? Job shop, because they have to be able to change the equipment out. Okay. What about variable costs, which is going to have higher variable costs?
Job shops.
Job shops, there you go. So you've done great, and you can expect something very similar to that on your exam. So make sure you're comfortable walking through what's what there. Okay?
What's going to be the batch, though, part of it?
Well, you're just saying
It's just in
higher to
between?
lower, right? So it's in between.
Oh, it's
all
in the
time.
middle? Okay.
Yeah. So basically, product volume-wise, you have the highest volume here, you have the mid-level here, and you have the lowest level here, right?
So you just like fill out mid all the way across the batch?
Yeah, or you can just draw an arrow up or an arrow down.
Okay.
Kind of, and then say, and I'll try to get the directions clear.
Okay.
Because the last time I did this question, somehow no matter how people answered, it could have been right depending on how they interpreted how to answer the question. And I'm like, okay, I have to clarify that. So I'll make sure I get that clear when we go to do that. Okay? So again, it seems to me though, like based on our conversation, that you all have a pretty good understanding of that. Okay?
We have the whole test have that?
No, the whole test can't be on that. All right. So the classification process is by positioning strategy. So when we say we have a functional focus, that's better suited for batch or job shop. Okay. And when we have a product focus, it's better suited for a flow shop. Okay. And at first, coming from my background, I had a hard time with this. But think about it this way. A product focus says, I'm going to do the same product again and again and again and again. Okay? So that means that you're doing the flow shop, right? It's the same product again and again and again and again. The functional focus, which is better suited for a job shop, says, I'm going to focus on the process itself, like what do I need to do in drilling? What do I need to do in the lathing section, right? And so I'm going to focus on those cells and what has to happen in those cells. And that's what we mean by this functional focus, right? What are the actual activities that take place? We're going to do those in batches, right? Versus in a product focus or a flow shop focus. I'm going to focus my production on that product, and I'm going to produce it multiple times again and again and again. Okay? And I won't tell you why that was confusing to me, because I think it will confuse you if I tell you. So we'll just leave that explanation as how I finally squared it away in my head. When we talk about classification of processes by customer interface, are you going to make it to stock or are you going to make it to order? Flow shops are great for make to stock. Okay, job shops are great for make to order. Okay? All right. Here's what we call the operations frontier. All right? And it fits when we talk about strategy, because you have to decide where you're going to compete. And where you compete is not, it doesn't mean that if you choose one spot that it's wrong, but it means how you set up to compete in that spot has to be different than in another spot. So as an example, I can do a world-class emergency room here, right? And we're going to have very high responsive, right? But my cost efficiency is going to be low, because I'm going to have to be set up to do whatever I need to do, whatever walks in that door, okay? On the other hand, I can have a world-class non-emergency hospital, right, that can be very cost-efficient, that I can try to do the same types of procedures on a regular basis, okay? So think of like that Aravind eye clinic, right? They're doing the same thing again and again and again, okay? And so they're going to be very cost-efficient, but they have very low, they can't respond to other things. They can do eye surgery, right? But they can't do all of this other realm of things. So how I set up in each of those spaces is very different, right? And what we say is, on this operational frontier, any of these choices, what you're saying is you're making the best use of your inputs and turning them into outputs. And so they can all be good choices, but you have to figure out how to use those inputs in the most efficient manner depending on where you're at in that operations frontier. Okay? So when managers are considering changes to the operating policies of a process structure that's already in place, they ask, how could we better design and manage our business process? In Figure 2.4, which is this slide, we look at a variety of product offerings using the two dimensions of responsiveness and cost effectiveness. So in general, a picture like this can be visualized with all four dimensions. You could put cost and quality and timeliness on there as well. Okay. However, we tend to, on paper, a two-dimension is a better view. So we elect to use only two dimensions to be able to demonstrate it. Okay. So the operations frontier is the smallest curve that contains all current industry positions, and it represents the current best practices of the world-class firms. So everybody that's on this operations frontier is best practice, right? They're in the best position of anybody in the industry. Everybody in this location, so I'll just tell you, we use what we call data and development analysis when we do some of our research, and we find this efficiency frontier. And so then what we do is we say, these are the firms that are on the frontier, these are the firms that are not. What is it that these firms need to do to move to the frontier? Is it labor, where they're not efficient? Is it use of their resources? What is it that's keeping them from being on that efficiency frontier? right? And as a business manager, that's what you're trying to do, is how do we put ourselves on that frontier, okay? All right. So when we talk about the operations frontier, right, there's trade-offs that go along with that. Improvements in operational effectiveness bring a company closer to the frontier or move the frontier itself, if you're already on it, along the direction of improvement specified by the strategic position. As technology and management practices advance, the operations frontier shifts outward or away from the point of origin in the competitive space. So what the first one is saying is, as I shift resources, I'm either going to move towards the frontier or away from the frontier, or if I'm on the frontier, maybe I'm going to shift position where I'm located here, okay? But the only thing that shifts the frontier outward then is typically some new innovation of technology or management practices that we're not currently using, okay? So if you're on the operations frontier, you're kind of considered best in class, okay? All right. Therefore, world-class firms must continuously improve operational effectiveness merely to maintain their current position. The internet is an example of a technology that's changed the operating frontier for many organizations, right? I can do a lot of things using the internet that I couldn't do in terms of research and understanding what options are out there, okay? I think of how, just kind of how someone that wrote their dissertation 40 years ago, right? And you had to go to the library and you had to request that they mail you copies of articles, right? And the delay in terms of you had to mail the request to them, they had to mail the paper back to you. There was no way to keep a track of it digitally, so you had to have big file boxes to do all this, right? And in today's environment, it's just a heartbeat away to go to MSU libraries, and I can research pretty much whatever I want. If they don't have it, I can request it, and they'll get me a digital copy of it, usually within 2 or 3 days, right? And so if you think about how much more knowledge we can amass just because of what's now out there and available to us, I know, it's probably, I'm dating myself, right? But I think about like the guy that I replaced, and when he did his dissertation, and what I was able to, the resources I was able to use when I did mine, I'm thinking, I'm so very thankful I live in the time that I do, right? So opportunities today in service operations. So the growth of the internet and telecommunications has transformed and continues to transform service operations processes. So sometimes today, McDonald's will have remote order takers. In some places, like let's say that you were at a McDonald's in Washington, D.C., right?
Oh my
and
gosh.
You're doing the drive-through. It might not be somebody inside that store that's taking your order. It could be somebody at a remote location that's actually taking your order, right?
One in the Smithsonian is unreal.
Is it?
You order and you literally, your food is like there before you even get done paying. Like it's like,
Well,
it's
and
unreal
that's
fast.
volume that they can have it in process. They kind of have an idea of who's going to order what. Aravind Eye Hospitals. Medical technicians man remote sites while ophthalmologists diagnose using a video conferencing link. How much cooler is that we can service healthcare needs around the world that we wouldn't have been able to do before? And so again, both are examples where technology is used to improve the utilization of labor resources. And the thing of it is, when you're looking at your processes, you're trying to understand what's your most expensive. Remember when we talked about Southwest and the planes are the most expensive thing that they've got going on? So you have to figure out how to utilize them most effectively, right? And so as you're looking at the processes what's the most expensive resource you've got, and you're trying to make sure that you utilize it as efficiently as possible, right? So from a doctor standpoint, right, instead of them driving in to the hospital to look, right, you've taken, if it's the weekend or if it's after hours, right, or they can sit at home and bring it up on their computer and do the exact same thing from there, and think about how much time that saves for the patient and for the doctor. Everybody has a better outcome because of that, because of how this technology changes things. Okay, so I'm going to encourage you to review the summary on page 41. We don't really have time to discussion questions in class time today, but you have, I think, part of your assignment for this chapter is to do discussion questions 2.1, 2.7, and 2.9, which are on Canvas. Okay, so I think that's where we're at. All right, and we'll come back here on Thursday and we'll do an exam review, okay? All right. Okay, on this group, when are you guys meeting? Have you?
Yeah, I sent an email